Some of them will they'll want the business, right, over the fact that it's a great match. I've seen that happen. Like maybe that's a big problem or maybe it's not, but I've seen agencies probably take on clients that they shouldn't have, probably just to get the new business, right? To secure revenue. And I think that also leads to bad outcomes for both parties too.
This is You Should Talk To, a podcast for busy marketing leaders who are looking for support and tips on getting shit done. In each episode, Daniel Weiner interviews marketing leaders and discusses their experience, successes, and failures around hiring agencies. If you're interested in finding and choosing the right agency partner, then let's jump in.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the You Should Talk To podcast. I am Daniel Weiner, your host, and this podcast is currently brought to you by myself, as well as You Should Talk To, until we get a sponsor. You Should Talk To pairs brands and marketers for free with vetted agencies and or freelancers for marketing and tech needs, because finding great agencies is an enormous pain in the ass. I'm super pumped to be joined today by Drew Brucker, who is the VP of Growth at Lasso. Drew, thank you for joining us. Heard you had a late night last night. I appreciate you making the early podcast this morning.
Yeah, I'm not a normal late nighter, just for the record. I have kids now, so this is definitely out of the norm, but my breath and my just energy level is down a few notches.
Okay,
today, so,
perfect. We'll make this like a 3-minute podcast.
Yeah,
what concert was it?
So went to go see a band called Foals. They're an English band, and like internationally, I would say they're really well known. They play in really big venues, but over here, they were playing at the Eastern, which is just like a newer, smaller place over in Grant Park. I had never been.
Like
awesome.
Around the corner from me.
Awesome venue. Yeah. Over by, Cabbagetown area. And, it was really cool because I love seeing comedians in bands in small venues. And
me too.
It was fantastic. Yeah.
I'm out of my big venue, million people. Although a couple of weeks ago for my brother's 40th, I saw Dave Matthews at Madison Square Garden, which was,
that's nice.
Brought back all the feels of my angsty middle school and high school self listening to
Absolutely.
Dave. But let's kick off the marketing portion of this. We can get back to the music later. What is an unpopular opinion or a hot take of sorts that you have in the marketing realm?
Yeah, I've got two that I've talked about recently. And one of the things that, you and I both enjoy is sort of bouncing ideas out there into, the LinkedIn platform and sort of ideating in public. And so one of the things that I brought up recently was, the idea that we really need to stop asking or expecting marketers to deliver or report on ROI for every single marketing activity. I think that's something that, a lot of marketers have felt for a long time, but I think it's just more obvious now because as a marketer, there are so many things that aren't black and white. And as marketing's being asked to really align more and more to revenue over time, some of those things are trackable, but some aren't, right? And, the trap that some companies fall into at a leadership level that maybe don't fully understand marketing or have done things in the past is they will sort of use ROI as the strategic driver for all marketing activities. And that just doesn't work well because you will also sacrifice great things that you could have done just because it can't tie directly back to ROI. So I think there are other things that can substitute out for that. Something like ROO, which I've talked about, which is just return on objective, right? What is the actual objective or objectives that you have for this particular campaign or this program or this channel? And if that's measurable, it doesn't have to be directly tied to revenue. It could be tied to a goal. It could be tied to brand awareness, exposure. Some of those other things that do actually matter could be leading indicators for future success. So that's one thing. I would say the other.
Before you even go on, I'm curious, did you come up with ROO? I've never heard of that.
I didn't come up with it myself. It was a question that I was trying to answer for myself. I came across ROO in an article and then I just dove deeper into the idea of it.
I think it's interesting what you're saying too, especially now. I totally agree. I think we get obsessed with if you can't measure it, you can't do it, which again, I know things have to be measured and everything is easier said than done when it's not my own money. However, it's interesting now, especially with what's going on in the economy and jobs and stuff like that. I'm curious your opinion. I talked to a lot of marketers who are in times of uncertainty like this, like scared to do stuff like that because everything is getting looked at under a microscope. I'm curious your opinion of that. Like, do you think, I would say now is the time for brands, to like do crazy shit, for lack of a better word, and those brands will potentially win. But I feel for, the CMO who has an 18-month shelf life in their position and stuff like that, to say to them like, oh, we're going to do like this kind of crazy thing that can't be measured. Like, what do you think? I'm curious your opinion on that, like with where things are now in tech.
It's a lot to unpack, but I almost see it as, now that there are more avenues for marketers to bounce other ideas off of each other, and more communities, more conversations that are taking place. Like, I think there was a lack of that when a lot of marketers that are our age first started. Like, we went through the digital transformation. There weren't a lot of online communities where people were talking and ideating about what they're doing day to day in their jobs. And so what I'm kind of guessing or speculating on is that marketers are really having these conversations at scale now, to a point where I think leadership is going to sort of have to adapt and bend somewhat to the people that they hire at the same time. Because what's going to happen, at least in my opinion, is some of the marketers that really know what matters now, what's going to matter in the coming years, they're going to make sure that they're aligned to leadership before they take these jobs. And I think they're going to start to vet, for things that probably, they weren't vetting for a job or two ago. Like, how do you view marketing? For example, like, do we need to track ROI for every single thing that we're doing? What does success look like for marketing? What are some of the North Star metrics that you think we should be responsible for? And if you've got an idea of that, and the company's got an idea of that, do those align? And if not, is that a battle, quote unquote, that you want to fight long term,
Sure.
for the sake of the company? So I just think the alignment part of it is going to be more important now. And so both sides are going to have to compromise on that. I just know if I'm looking for a job tomorrow, like, those are the questions that I want to really align on, in addition to all the other things with compensation, culture, team, people, etc.
Sure. No, it makes total sense. What's the second hot take of yours that you were going down?
Yeah, I think this is what I've noticed. It's probably more for smaller teams, but marketers too, we're so focused on net new acquisition, but churn is something that I think we should at least be tracking, not solely responsible for. I think that's definitely a CS KPI and metric, but marketers that are tied into what's happening with that number are going to have they're going to be able to wrap their arms holistically around revenue as a whole for their company. They're not just thinking about net new, because net new in a lot of ways can cost more to acquire than retaining a customer. But how penetrated are my current customers into my product? How much room is there for upsells? What is the experience like, right? From the sales handoff to implementation to onboarding to adoption to advocacy. And marketing can help, really communicate those things, provide a better experience, help CS and partner with CS to create automated touch points for qualitative feedback, right? And really doing some of the hand-holding and nurturing that can take place in addition. I don't expect CS to not necessarily be marketers, right? They're not marketers. They're trying to set their customer up for success, support them, et cetera. And so I think aligning with that team closely, and at least keeping an eyeball on, hey, this is net new acquisition. Here are some other areas, right, in upsells that we can also affect revenue. At the end of the day, the marketer's goal is revenue, right? So if you can sort of grasp that life cycle marketing, especially if you're on a smaller team, I think that's key. So that was sort of a hot topic, because it's like, okay, well, marketing can't do everything. And I agree. Marketing's got a lot on the plate.
I saw your post. You ruffled some feathers, which I think the sentiment or intent was lost on a lot of people who I saw like posting kind of like, I mean, it's fine. I'm totally all for not like for people disagreeing, and I hate when I see just like a bunch of comments that are like, yeah, like definitely 100%, but
Yeah,
I recall, I can't remember who they were from, but I like read some of the comments where I was like, I don't think that's what Drew was saying there. Like, I believe your sentiment was more around like visibility into those things as well. Like, you can't have like 100% responsibility, but you should know
care.
they're going on.
Yeah, we should. Exactly. Right. Like, that's where it's as like, I should know what the churn rate is, and I should know what touch points CS has that are already set up, and the quality of those conversations, and whether or not we're getting the feedback we need to inform us, right, of churn risk, or to just maintain revenue. And then also, right, the upsell opportunity. If there are measurements in place or processes in place that we can see there is areas here for growth or here for growth, like why not have marketing think about lifecycle marketing in that sense, right? Like, how do we introduce a tool that maybe in the sales demo, they told us they could eventually be, a great candidate for, but they didn't sign up for that initially, right? And how is CS going about upselling? Do they need help with that? That's the point, right? There's some marketing help that can help.
We're also in the new frontier of like the last couple of years have been grow at all costs. And now people are like looking at like crazy metrics like profitability and like, like actual things that should have been looked at. So things like churn make total sense, which is like bizarre. Like even in my own business, which is, not a multi-million-dollar SaaS business, but like, I don't want to lose clients. Like I care more about that than like bringing on new and stuff like that. So it's interesting to hear. But for those who haven't heard of it, tell us a little bit more about Lasso.
Yeah, Lasso right now in its current state, I would say the best way to provide an analogy would be that it is workforce management software for the live events industry. So if you think of any concert, festival, sporting event, any entertainment that takes place, there is usually a company behind the scenes that helps put on that event, right? They're hiring maybe their own people, but they've also got freelancers that do audio, video, lighting, setting up the stage, right? And so we help those companies with our software do scheduling, time tracking, onboarding, communication in real time with times they need to help set up the event, what they're doing at the event after, so stern to stem sort of, process with the event taking place. We handle all of sort of that labor management perspective for those companies. And the status quo of that currently is using spreadsheets and workforce management software that isn't made for the industry. And so, they can maybe do 70% of it, but they've got to kind of spit and duct tape it together. So it's not quite what they need. And so we provide that. It's really interesting too, because we have a dual marketplace as well that those audio, lighting, and video people can sign up for.
It's great.
And most of them freelance, right? So maybe they're working for this company this week, this company the next. We can provide additional opportunities for them. And we can also help the companies because we've already vetted these people for their skill set, experience. And if they need Daniel that lives in Austin, Texas, instead of flying Drew from New York to Texas, I know Daniel could do just as good of a job as Drew, and I don't have to fly him.
You're the you should talk to of the live event space, just start saying that, everybody. Household name over here,
Perfect.
Yeah.
I'll test that ad copy out.
Yeah. They're like, who the hell is that guy? I'm just curious before we move on, are things back in the event space for you all, at least like to a pre-COVID level or some level of normalcy and stuff?
I don't have the 2022 numbers in full yet, but the full projection was that it was absolutely going to beat 2019, which 2019 was the peak. And 2023, I think, is at least on paper and initial reports supposed to crush 2022. So I think they're totally back, right? You had all the pent up demand of people wanting to get out of the house, see other people, experience things in person again. And I just think while hybrid and virtual is going to have a place moving forward, right? There's nothing that can fully replace live events.
Yeah, I totally agree. I can't remember the last time I actually attended something I really wanted to that was like virtual, truthfully. Like between webinars and roundtables and stuff like that, like they just, we've done it for too long. Like they've lost their luster and their allure.
And you can get distracted too, right? Like, because it's how we work daily. And so it's like, okay, I've got this scheduled that I'm going to attend this virtual thing, but I also know that I have other things to do. So maybe I'm doing that in the background versus actually being somewhere, being present in the moment and experiencing it.
Yeah, I was glad we did this today, so I didn't have to miss the World Cup yesterday or like have that on in the background, So you have my full attention today.
Good.
Yeah. I believe that, at least for me and most people, like, the past experiences that you've had at different jobs kind of ultimately lead you to where you are today and theoretically make you a better marketer or better at whatever job you're doing, which is why I'm such a big proponent of, if I had to give any like blanket advice to young people, get as much experience as you can early on to find out truthfully what you hate as well and that you don't want to do so that you can find what you do want to do and all that sort of stuff. You've worked at places like Full Steam, Rubicon, which I actually attended like an event of Rubicon a million years ago and heard the founder speak, which was really cool. What do you think you've brought along the way, like with you to your current role that's made you better at what you do today?
Yeah, I think you answered it probably just how I would have answered it. I just think it's so important I think people have different journeys. Like I look at my brother. My brother's been with the same company for the last 10, 11, 12 years. That's rare now. For me, I jumped jobs seemingly like every year and a half. And I remember people would say, hey, like, are you job jumping? But it was never that to me, because what I quickly realized is, okay, is there either more to earn, more to learn? And is my ceiling capped here, right? Like, do I understand how far I could go here? And is this place going to kind of give me what I need from that perspective? And if the answers were no, like I quickly pivoted and looked for something else. And I think part of that was just the idea of something new was also exciting for me. I love to do something new, have new challenges, but you're absolutely right. Like especially in your 20s, you're searching for things that you really gravitate toward, right? So naturally, the fastest way to do that is to be as exposed to as many things as possible. One way to do that is to work in different industries with different bosses, different teammates, use different tools, wear different hats. Another thing that I did early in my marketing career was I did some freelancing as well. So some of the things I wasn't doing in my full-time role, I was doing outside of work as projects, getting paid for it, and also learning at the same time. And so I found that to be a great level up. So there is no replacement for that. I continue to tell anybody that I work with that's younger than me, like, that is the key to really challenging the perspectives that you have to evolve with it, right? Because you don't want to assume that you know it all. You never will know it all. And the only way to know what you don't know is to kind of put yourself in those situations.
Yeah, I think it's interesting about the job jumping too. I've had I would say like a non-traditional path. I worked a normal job after college, then worked for myself, then worked at an agency for 7 years, which like you said is kind of unheard of before going out on my own, kind of like by necessity. Anybody, I think the whole loyalty thing is like one of the biggest lies we were sold prior to COVID. And one of the good positive things about COVID, obviously the terrible stuff sucks, but yeah, like there is, I firmly believe like there shouldn't be loyalty to the company. It's good if that's a part of it, but like, if they're not paying you what you need, if they're not helping you grow as a person and in your career and stuff like that, I think it's bizarre that companies say, oh, like we don't want to hire that person. They job jumped. Well, like ask them some questions, see why they job jumped, stuff like that before you make some sort of blanket statement.
It's got to be a mutual relationship and mutually beneficial.
Yeah.
If it starts to be, the other way with the company taking precedent over your mental health or, just your satisfaction or capping your growth, then you absolutely have that right and should feel empowered to do yourself a favor and see what else is out there.
Yeah, it's also, I'd say, like, as somebody who, when I was like thinking of leaving my old job for a little while prior to actually doing it, I thought in my head, like, oh, this is kind of cushy. Like, I make good money. Like, I can't get this anywhere else. And then, like, once the day I resigned and like started exploring and like thinking of working for myself and just interviewing for other full-time jobs, you quickly realize, like, oh, that's like not true at all. There's so much out there, which is why, like, even people who are happy in their jobs who I talk to, I encourage to like just take calls like as much as humanly possible just to gain more perspective. Like even if you love your job, maybe perspective earns you a few more dollars or something like that. I think it's so important to like continuously have conversations with folks in your field or outside of it just to gain that understanding.
I mean, remember what that was like 10 years ago though? Like we literally had to use our network and call or text somebody, that was it. Like you weren't having exposure to all these things at scale like we are now.
Yeah.
So I think you're also saying that. So you're saying kind of we're sold on this and that, like totally. Like I felt very blindsided by a lot of things in the workplace just because you were just a product of your own experience. You really didn't have many people other than people you worked alongside to weigh those things against.
Yeah. COVID, I joke, again, there was, of course, terrible things that occurred, but COVID was the best thing that ever happened to me personally or professionally. I would say, like, I've never learned more about myself, what I want to do, what's important in the world, which outside of family and friends and like your own mental health is virtually nothing, I think is the answer to that question of like, what's actually important. So yeah, like you were right. Decade ago, if you wanted that, you didn't know. I don't know what I would have done. Like if
you would have had to call me up, or I would have had to call you up and be like, "Hey, Daniel, like what's your experience been like with your boss? Like, do we have the same experience? Yeah, like
madness. I know you've had experience hiring them and working with them. I'm curious, what's your like overall blanket, opinion or thoughts on agencies in general? Pro, against, love them, hate them, somewhere in between?
I feel like this is going to be a very polarizing question.
That's the goal. Nothing but controversy on this podcast today.
I found some I loved, found some I've had terrible experiences with, right? Just like, bad bosses almost. Like you've had great bosses and you've had some terrible. It's the same with agencies for me. But I think that it comes down to there are some flaws that exist within the way that they pair up and align. Okay. So for companies, I think there can be a tendency, like if I come into a new role and I know I need something done, there is a good chance that I could settle for an agency that's not the right fit because I need something quickly, right? So the urgency factor, or I just don't have a lot of personal contacts that I know with agencies. So I'm starting from scratch.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe it's a combination of the two, which is then really sort of you raising your chance for misalignment. For agencies, I feel like, now this is a little bit more of speculation because I've never directly worked for an agency. This is my personal opinion, but I think some of them they'll want the business, right, over the fact that it's a great match. I've seen that happen. And depending 100%. On the agency, right, like maybe that's a big problem or maybe it's not. But I've seen agencies probably take on clients that they shouldn't have, maybe even including positions I've been in, probably just to get the new business, right, to secure revenue. And I think that also leads to bad outcomes for both parties too. So lastly, I would say the other factor that goes into it is with agencies and companies, alignment, communication, expectations are all key, but it can also kind of fall into that group project scenario from a high school or college where there are so many people involved or a group of people involved that there's not really one or two people taking direct ownership in a way. Like, so if I've got 3 of my people working on a project, I might be willing to overlook something because I think somebody else is going to do something.
Sure.
I think somebody else is going to do that. Could happen on the agency. I've seen that also occur, but it's usually something like that is ultimately the downfall in my experience.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear, it's the same for everybody basically, of like there's some you love, some you've hated, everybody's had good, bad experiences, which we'll dive into in a little bit. I think it's interesting because since I'm an advocate for both sides, like again, I'm more beholden to the brand because I want, again, at the end of the day, I want to do right by the brand. I want to present them options that work for them and they make the decision. I don't tell them who to pick or anything like that. I just happen to think that my agencies are great. But a big thing that I appreciate about the agencies I attempt to work with, or I love when agencies tell me no. When I call about an opportunity and they're like, we wouldn't be a good fit because of X, Y, and Z. And every time I thank them more than when they're like, yes, we'd love to chat. I'm like, thank you for not taking that, because then it makes me look even better. The only time I look bad is if I make a non-relevant introduction. But to your point, like, yeah, it's when people tell me like, oh, I hate an agency, which I hear all the time, daily. I take it with a grain of salt because I will say this, on that spectrum, everybody has an experience like that. And even on the other side, when people are like, oh, they're the best agency in the world, I hear that all the time. And I don't believe that for one second. Even when agencies tell me that, oh, we're the best at something, my answer is, no, you're not. No one's the best. You're the best, maybe, or you're really good for certain types of clients or certain scenarios. You're more right in certain scenarios, but like
they're the best. They're the best that we've found.
Yeah. 100%.
That we've used. That's the context, right? Because depending, like if I had one vendor that I liked and I had 3 others that I hated, they're the best. This
is actually super timely. I don't know if you saw my LinkedIn post today yet. You can be honest if you didn't.
I did see it. I did see it.
Did you read it? What I did yesterday?
I did. Yeah, you took some new calls. Yeah. Yeah.
I posted on, I thought this was going to happen, but I was optimistic. I want new agency partners, and in an effort to like not have agencies reach out directly, I wanted recommendations from brand marketers, like people who actually hire them, CMOs, VPs, directors of marketing. I put out a LinkedIn post. I posted in several communities. I was super specific on the criteria that I wanted, and I got inundated with phone calls, which is wild, text messages, LinkedIn messages, Slack messages, emails, and I shit you not, like 5% or so followed the rules, or you could even tell read the actual post, Like literally somebody who actually followed the rules reached out to me this morning and was like, I hope that wasn't about me. I was like, no, you followed the rules. Like you sent me an agency that fit these criteria. And It was an interesting perspective to like put myself in the shoes. One of the questions that I'll ask you here in a few is like, how often are you getting hit up by agencies and vendors? It is wild out there. And to even have that experience for a day yesterday, It was bizarre. I was like, holy shit, they're dealing with this every single day. This is insane, like literal insanity. And of the people who didn't follow the rules, like no one was a fit. No one was what I would want to work with and stuff. And it was such a turnoff that even if they were, I'm like, you didn't even read the post. Like, what's going on? It was a wild
kind of level of detail are you going to give my project here?
It was just bizarre.
You know, I don't know that I get hit up actually that much from agencies as much as I do freelancers on LinkedIn, pitch slap, and like just try to get work, or just other vendors in general. Like in my role, like it's a lot of like sales development, revenue, any tool or platform around that. I'm just getting blasted to the point that I just deleted so fast. Like I couldn't even tell you how many I get. As soon as I see a name I don't know and I read the subject line, I've never heard of it, it's like, boom, done.
Where do you find then, outside of course, working with me in the future, where do you find, like, if you are looking for a freelancer or a vendor or an agency, like, what are you normally doing?
I am either, like, I'm using existing relationships. So it'd be somebody like you. Is it somebody, an agency I worked with in the past that I've had a good experience with? Or is there someone on my team that's had a good experience with an agency that's relative to the project? I think it probably falls into like one of those three buckets. And if those lead me nowhere, then I think it's probably, doing more of a proactive ask around other people I trust for introduction. But I usually have started just with myself and my team. Do we know anybody? And then, is there anybody that I have any existing relationships with? Outside of that, no, then I'll reach out. But that's generally how I found vendors in the past. It hasn't been by Google, I'll tell you that.
Kathleen Booth, the SVP of marketing at Pavilion which I know you're in. She came on the podcast and had a quote that has always stuck with me, that community is the new Google. Like no one goes, people go to Google for validation. If somebody says, hey, check out these guys, like, you go to Google and look them up and like see what you can find, but no one is starting their, for the most part, vendor or agency search by Googling, website development agency Atlanta, presumably, which I totally agree with. I don't know anybody who does that.
That's not happening anymore.
Once you have kind of like, decided, hey, we have a need that would require outsourcing in some capacity, what are you in general looking for from an agency or vendor? What would stand out to you going through the process with someone?
The best agencies that I've worked with are very granular with the details. I've run into, we're probably going to get into some good and bad examples of this, but the bad example I've run into has been with sort of the ambiguity of the details in the scope of work, right? Where it's like, it says this, but there's, and then going back to the end of the project, it's like, well, this is in here. And it's like, well, we meant this. And it's like, I'm pretty sure I didn't really interpret it that way. Like this means this to me. And so I think, the alignment.
This is triggering me as somebody who worked at an agency for so long, dealing with these conversations.
I know you know this.
It's hard. It's hard. I will say, I totally get what you're saying. Like for certain things, like the line I use is like, there is an inherent layer of gray in virtually everything. Like you want to make sure you're aligned on the big things. But like I've been in projects where like we've gotten to the end and they're like, hey, where's this? And I'm like, that's not even in the contract. Like we've never even talked about that. Like, what do you mean? They're like, well, we thought because of this. And again, like some you're like, all right, I can see like and other times you're like, I don't know what you want me to do, man. like that's a whole other project or anything. But contracts are tough with agencies, especially when you're dealing with like, technologies and stuff like that. But yeah, like being aligned on expectations is the only thing.
Yep. Like scope creep, what is maybe in here that, or not in here, that sort of is tied directly enough to where if this changes or this makes some sort of, pivot, that it's still within scope. And then to your point, which I think is a great one, there's this inherent layer of gray, which triggered me to think like you're dealing with two different, personalities, the personality of company A and the personality of company B. How your own team works and talks and communicates and what they mean by this. All of those, euphemisms, the language, you understand expectations, sort of the cursive knowledge of when I'm talking about this is what this means. Those could be totally different for another company, right? And so just going back to the point, there's a lot of things that you need to level set on and set a good foundation for whatever the project is. So, those first two meetings, the kickoff and the expectations, I think are really key, but it's also the communication along the way. And going back to your point of like, what are some of those things like for companies, just in the small team perspective, like we've also got just so many things that are going on. It's like, we need to hold the agency accountable. The agency also needs to hold us accountable. Let's be very specific about deadlines, dates.
Yeah.
If we miss this is the result of missing that, right? Just being on the same page with that.
We actually, at my old agency, took it a step further and had, I want to say it was like a canned document we created that we would tweak for each one, but it was a page in the contract that was like common things that could affect timeline and budget. And it was like, the same for everybody, but then we would tweak the few things for that specific project or engagement, like based on our conversation stuff, so that like we took painstaking effort. There's still, and again, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I think it's just like, goes back to my biggest thing of like knowing your audience and just like over communicating is you will never get everything into a contract. Like it's just impossible. You'll never get 100% of the what ifs into a statement of work or a legal document or anything, because the world and the internet is weird. So
that goes back to what we talked about at the beginning, picking the right customer, picking the right agency. Like what kind of people are you working with? Because there are just going to be people that are just tough, and like, do you want to fight them? Like, is that worth the revenue to you? It's a legitimate question, because, I've got a buddy right now that just started a marketing agency, and, he's in a position where, he's got a full client base at the moment, but he, to get there, when he had to build that, right, he had to kind of take some guesses as to who he wanted to work with. And that always comes back to bite. He's like, dude, this guy, wants this. And the ideologies that we just have are totally different, right? But he's paying me for this and I'm delivering this, but then he doesn't want to sort of react or sort of interpret the feedback in this direction, right? So it just caused a headache. So, working with the right people too can account for some of those things that aren't, very specific in the contract language. Just knowing that they're good people, there's going to be a little bit of that give and take.
Sure. I've seen a big shift, especially since COVID, or probably because of COVID. It kind of like opened everybody's eyes, of bigger brands moving towards smaller independent agencies specialized in like 1 to 2 things or 1 to 2 services. What do you think of that?
I like that idea. I think what I've heard, I don't know that I've necessarily experienced this as much because I haven't worked with huge agencies, but I know huge agencies, right? Maybe depending on the size of the deal, the number of people that are involved, maybe the total volume of work that they do and the number of clients they take on, right? It can just be more of a, almost like a just check in the box type of thing. Whereas a boutique agency, somebody that maybe is a little bit under the radar, that gets somebody, it means a lot more to them. Maybe they're going to, sort of work that extra hour. They're going to do this and they're going to, sort of put a little bit more of the icing on the cake, if you will. I've experienced the pain of using an agency that probably specialized in 1 to two things, but they said they did everything.
You
right?
hired them for something, not those 1 to 2 things.
And the mistake that I ran into was we had a great project, which was right in the wheelhouse with those 1 to 2 things. They understood our business so well and they did so well in that project. It's like, okay, well, they also do this. Check their work. It's good enough, right? And went that route. It was a totally different experience. It was a nightmare after that. And so I think that's a great idea, right? Using a smaller agency that, probably specializes in 1 to 2 because they're being very honest and specific about what they do well.
Yeah. The problem, I think some of those agencies eventually, and we did at my old agency, like we said yes to everything. When we would say no, sometimes, clients basically sometimes, because it's a time saving and they trust you, you do something well and they're like, oh, can you do this other thing? And you're like, no, we don't really do it. And then they ask again, like it's hard to say no to money. So I think like for agencies, the ones that are ruthless, within reason of like what they're saying yes to, because again, like, there's a somewhat disagreement. I would say a lot of people would say like the biggest asset to an agency is their clients, but I would argue it's your employees. Employees are the ones working on the accounts, and if they're pissed off, they're not doing good work. So of course you need both, and it's chicken or egg. But yeah, like the agencies that I work with that are pretty ruthless and like the type of work and type of clients that they take on are generally more successful than those that just say yes to everything, I would say.
Yeah, I would agree.
Let's talk some shit now.
Let's do it.
We'll do some positive first, and then we'll talk some shit. But you mentioned a little earlier, we won't name any names, but on the positive side, talk me through like a positive agency experience you've had and what made it so positive.
Value. I wasn't originally, it's not my money, it's the company's money, but I think like
interesting.
If you
First person to answer value.
Yeah, like I don't know. I wasn't thinking that when I initially heard the question, it just kind of popped in. But like I really do think that's important because it's like, man, great work for a good price. Just there's something that just sits great with that, right? Like sometimes and more often than not, you're paying for what you get.
Yeah.
But I've also been pleasantly surprised by some quotes I've gotten for the quality of work it is. And it's like, deep, like that's great. I think the things that make it great are, the communication, like we've already hammered home, the expectations being aligned. If things shift, keeping track of those in real time, holding each other accountable. If it's somebody that's a creative agency, well, it doesn't even have to be creative, but I love live walkthroughs. Like take me through something because don't just send me a bunch of reports, like especially being on a small team. I got to admit, I'm probably not going to look at them or look at them for longer than 5 or 10 minutes. Like,
sure. That's fair.
We've got the time for the call. And I would love to see and talk through that on the fly in real time because I don't want there to be any ambiguity about what they're thinking and what we're thinking and there to be anything lost in translation there.
Yeah, I think the takeaway, I asked some of these questions at this point. I think you're the 16th episode that I've recorded. I ask these like in a selfish way because they further my kind of thesis of the entire world. Like I know you mentioned value and then you said like for good work, but when you listed out the specific things, it had nothing to do with the actual work. You listed communication, you listed process, you listed live walkthroughs. So like the two takeaways that basically everybody either says or eventually is like, oh yeah, I guess that is know your audience. Like I know plenty of people who do not like live walkthroughs because they don't have time to sit for an hour and do that. They want to send it, review with their team. Totally fine. That's their style. If the agency is working with you and that person, they should do the live walkthrough with you and they should send them the thing and figure out like how to best combine and stuff like that. And then the second biggest thing that everybody says, whether they realize it or not, is like, of course the work matters. That's my hot take. My hot take is the work does not matter. What I mean by that is, of course it matters, but you don't get to do the work. If your process isn't great, you're not likable, like you don't actually want to spend time with them, you're not going to get hired. Or you're going to get hired and then you're going to get fired, or they're just going to be pissed off doing it. Even if you do great work, like that's kind of the cost of like the price of admission at this point. Like there are so many, that's why people ask me all the time, like, are your agencies better? I say it depends how you define that. Like, I think they are really good at what they do. However, like what I care significantly more about, they are monsters with communication. They are monsters on process and they eat up other people's lunches because of those things. Again, if I asked you for a recommendation and you said, oh, don't work with these people, their work sucks, I'd ask, how is their process and communication? I would much rather hear, hey, an agency you set us up with, the website looked like shit and we hated it. I'd rather hear that than they didn't follow up. Like they missed a call. They were supposed to, our deadline was Tuesday and they didn't send it till Thursday. That stuff makes my chest, like my heart palpitate and like I'm going to have a nervous breakdown at some point in my life. I would rather hear that you don't like the work. It's subjective, truthfully. I hear so many people all the time say like, oh, we don't like they're creative. I'm like, they won an award for that thing. Somebody liked it, like, or that client liked it. Like they built it for that client. I have to like remind marketers that all the time. I'm curious of your opinion there. Like, are you even thinking of the actual product a lot of the time?
For me, yes, but I don't think I'm in the majority. I love design. I love aesthetics. I do graphic design stuff just willy-nilly on my free time sometimes. I mean, it's just a creative hobby that I enjoy. So like
if the process sucks though, like if it's a pain in the ass to get to the good work, what are your thoughts? Which is more important if you had to pick, like I'll put you on the spot.
That's fair. I don't know that I've run into that scenario actually, because usually the ones that do good work have also done a really good job. And the ones that, haven't done good work have been really just a pain to deal with. Like I haven't had that sort of trade-off to think, is this worth it? But
I think it's because the good process leads to so much in between the start and the finish that the work, it's like it becomes virtually impossible for the work to suck because you're along for the ride the entire way. And if it sucks, it's your fault, I would say, more than the agency.
I totally get that. I could totally see that for sure. Yeah. Like for me, I think probably if I'm putting myself in an agency shoes, like I've done enough graphic design and website stuff on my own that I probably am a little bit more involved than they probably want me to be. Because
no one's going to work with you after this reaches millions of people out there.
I already know I want it to look like this. Like even just like a minor thing. It's just like I'm very, I can be in tune with it. So I'm sure that I'm not always the easiest to work with, but I also think it's a trade-off. It can be extremely helpful because you know exactly what's in my mind, right? I'm translating everything for you. So.
Now, in general, I would say from my experience, it's helpful as long as again, it's a give and take. Like, if you're working with a creative director, like their strong opinions and you've hired them. So there is that dichotomy of like, you're paying us, like, do you want us to take orders? Do you want us to like push back? Like, I think that's an important conversation, truthfully, for folks like you who have a specific experience to say like, how much do you want us to push? And like, how much do you want us to collaborate versus taking direction? I think that's important.
See, and I asked that too, but, and it's also like the level of work that they deliver the first time will tell me a lot. Like, and I know it's usually not fully baked out, but I can understand where they're going with things. And I'll understand based on the work that I've already seen and the process that I'm going through, what this end result is going to be. And if that's sort of what's in my mind or not, I'm quick to sort of jump in and say, I'm actually thinking more of this. So I try to provide a lot of references and examples and explain the why behind the choices too, to help get there. I think it's maybe my experiences I've worked with some bad sort of creative. So I felt like I had to immerse myself more. That's also that could be the case as well.
That's fair. Let's talk about a negative agency experience you've had, and probably a good segue. Was it, work related, process related, some combination of both?
Everything, man. Everything.
All the above.
And I had this within like the last 2 years. So this was the one that I was just telling you about with, specialized probably in 1 to 2 things, but it's an agency that says they do it all. Right. So, the sort of the tricky part for me is we worked with them on a project that was right in the wheelhouse. They did great, put their top people on it, great communication. Everything went smooth, delivered ahead of time. Naturally have this other project. Oh, they do this as well. They do a website. Great. Here's some of their work. Okay, it looks okay. But I know like I've done website work before where it's like, this is good enough too, where if I'm involved in this process, I feel like I can, be very clear about what we're looking for and how we're going to get there. Whereas I don't know that other organizations they worked with maybe have a person that cares as much as me. And maybe they're just giving them the project. That was the way that I interpreted it. It's like, okay, this is in a pretty good spot. If I'm also involved, I feel like this is going to be great. Worked with them before. They already understand the business. Seems to make sense, right? And the price is good, right? Okay. Like, so, starts off great. People revolve on the projects, initial project leaders are no longer on the project. People are swapped out over the course of the project. Here's your project lead. Now they've left the company. Here's a new project lead. Don't even tell us, one of the people left the company. There were 2 people on the project that ended up getting changed out, like one halfway through and the other like 2 weeks before we're launching. That was tough to deal with, right? A lot of things that I thought would be pretty obvious in terms of like from a designer standpoint and putting a website together, 2 + 2 did not equal 4. It's just like, I'm not like, this isn't my full-time job, but like this and this seem to make like, this is pretty common sense stuff, right? And the delivery timelines were off. Missed, twice, right? By a month, 30 days each time.
Oof.
So, we're going through all this and then we get to the end, right? The last 2 weeks where I'm working nights, weekends, trying to pull all these things together because they just they need help. Like they need help. And I was just like, I have to get this done. And we get to the finish line. They're just some deliverables that were just super vague, right? We're going to help you with your page speed score, right? Like, we're redoing a site and at the beginning, You're like, well, look, page speed matters a lot, right? So what does that mean to you, right? And so I learned a valuable lesson where it's like page speed score. That was what was in the deliverable. It's like, okay, but qualitatively or quantitatively, like, is there a number associated with that? Are we going to hit like, this is going to load in this time? Is it going to go through Google Page Insights? Is it going to get this sort of score return? Like, what is the measurement? Because to me, it was like, okay, this is pulling back the same speed we had before. So where are we at here? Like, this is what my expectation was. And so just a lot of those the vagueness, right? The non-specifics at the finish line, in addition to all the other things with the revolving door of people and the delayed timelines. It was rough. It was really, really rough. And there is no coming back from that. Like, there was an opportunity to probably keep working with them in some other capacities. That whole thing fell out, like it was just so frustrating because I had to communicate, to my leadership team, here's what's happening, right? And here's why it's delayed. And then on the other side, it's like, why aren't these things taking care of themselves? Why isn't it, we missed a deadline on this. So you guys probably should have told us this is just going to delay things, or all of those pieces, right? And you feel like you're trapped in the middle. That was my really, really bad experience. It probably aged me 3 years in like a matter of, the 2 months toward the finish line there. It was rough.
Do you think that a negative agency experience, maybe not quite as bad as that, but do you think it can be salvaged? Or do you think like once it's reached a point of you've lost trust, they've missed the deadline, like it's kind of, like I'm not interested in these types of folks? Or do you think it can get back on the rails?
I've not seen it get back on the rails personally.
I think I joke, you get like 1.5 chances as an agency within the first, call it like 6 months. Early on, it's to be expected. Things are going to like maybe be a little bit weird. You can have one like somewhat big thing and one small thing. After
there you go. I was going to say, it depends on what it is, right? Because like, someone's a new agency, of course, you're going to be feeling out, there's going to be this feeling out process, and here's how we would like to receive something, or here's the, preferred communication out there, blah, blah, blah. But you're right.
There's nothing worse than missing a deadline, because it plants the seed of doubt in your mind. And I've been sitting in an agency where I'm like, we have to send this by 5. We have to. I can tell you that they are sitting at their computers waiting to receive this document. Like, it has to be received. And people being like, oh, are you sure? I'm like, yes. That is all that matters today. Sure. I am positive that they are sitting there looking at the clock, and they are, rightly so. That's why I'm such a big proponent. Do not give deadlines you cannot hit. If you are giving a deadline, you must hit your deadline. Unless something changes in between, and you communicate that, and you say, hey, this changed. We're going to need another day, which is, I think, totally fair, as long as it is communicated and something else happened. But if you give a deadline and nothing changes, you must hit the deadline. It is the cardinal rule of agency world.
Yep.
What are you most bullish on moving forward into? I know we talked a little bit about events, which is kind of like my shtick, but what are you most excited about? We talked before. I was going to beat you to the punch, Drew. I was going to give a different one. No, you can be bullish on events too.
No, I think I'm going to steal yours. And if anything else comes up, I'll mention. But I do think the live events component, but also the smaller, more intimate events too are great too. Like I went to Inbound in September, which is basically just a big, I guess it's a rev ops really event now. So it's, customer success, marketing, maybe even sales.
Yeah, I think it's everything now at this point. I think HubSpot wants everyone there.
They want everybody. But like, I had been 5 or 6 years ago previous to that, and it was very much around the sessions for me. This time it was about the sessions, but what I also noticed is it was much more about networking this time, right? I had made some connections on LinkedIn or just in groups, and it was less awkward, to have natural conversations with people in your shoes. And so live events I'm bullish on, not only as a consumer, but just in a business setting, as a marketing approach, and the things that are taking place there.
We took them for granted back in the day.
We did take them for granted. So I think that pent-up demand is like definitely, showing its face. I think I'm also bullish on like marketing, marketers taking back a little bit of the baton of what marketing is and should be. And if it's broken, here's how we fix it. I think we're in the time and place now where we've all kind of, there's sort of this millennial age group, right? Where we're mid-career, we've gone through this transformation of what marketing was and is, and how it was broken for a while. And, because somebody signs up for, fills out your form to get a white paper, they're all of a sudden ready to buy, from your company. And we were judged off, MQLs, it's just like, yeah, that's broken, right? Like that never really actually did work, did it? And, so you've got a lot of people that are really thinking creatively, but also, as we mentioned earlier, around revenue and the bigger picture of how marketing's involved there. And so I think I'm just bullish on the idea that marketers are taking a little bit more of that responsibility upon ourselves, and not from necessarily just hearing leadership's take and then, oh, we're just going to do this. I know that's happening, but I'm just saying I've seen that start to shift. And so I think that's interesting. I'm bullish on this idea of, this is a little bit outside of marketing, but like sort of this creator environment. Everybody, could essentially become their own.
Very meta with us on a podcast.
Very
right now,
meta, very meta. Like you own your personal brand. I just posted about this the other day, but like you have a personal brand, whether you like it or not. So you might as well make it a good one, because this is sort of the new version of your resume.
Yeah.
I don't need to go through 10 pages on a screen and upload a doc and think that you're going to get to know me and that I'm the best fit for this hire. Why not take control of that? Put yourself out there, have conversations like these, put yourself on video, do other things as a creator to help guide that. And so that's if you want to work for a company, but also you want to start your own thing. There's never been a better time to start your own thing. And so this is really sort of this age of taking control of those things in a way that you never had before.
Yeah, it is exhausting, but it has been very impactful. And I can't say a bad thing about it. It is like, some people are like, oh, like it seems so easy. You post every day. I'm like, not the case necessarily. Like,
yeah, that's right.
A lot more that goes into that. But to that end, this is the flip side of that question. What keeps you up at night from a marketing or business standpoint? Like what stresses you out, especially in our current environment?
Like, it's not even so much me right now. It's just my team and my company. Like I'm really in a great place. I love working for Lasso. It's been a great fit for me at this point in time in my life. The people here, the mission, where we're going with the product, the opportunity that's there with the roadmap. It checks so many boxes for me. So that really keeps me up at night, just because I'm always ideating. I'm thinking, should I be thinking about this? When is a good time to start this? And then same with my team. I want to make sure I have the right people in the right seats and that they're happy and not only working on things that they enjoy, but also that the company needs. And if we're checking both those boxes, that's perfect, right? So just really diving deep to make sure that health on both sides is up to my expectation, because that's what I worry about.
That's the curse of liking what you do. Like, I'm obsessed with what I do. I know I'm a little different because I work for myself. I kind of have to be, but I never turn my brain off because I like it. So like, I will literally, it's so unhealthy. I try not to do it. I'll sometimes wake up with like an idea at like 2 a.m. and I don't want to forget it. So I'll like run to my desk and like write it down, or like grab my phone and like jot something down. And I'm like, that's so unhealthy. What am I doing right now?
Are you keeping a notebook by your bed or your phone or what?
I used to keep a notebook. I try not to charge my phone next to my bed because I don't want to be tempted to look at it. So like once I get in bed, I charge my phone elsewhere.
That's what I'm doing too.
Yeah, but my bed's like right there. I live in a loft, so it's like one big warehouse. So like my bed is, 20 feet from my desk. So I'll just get up and be like, oh, I'll just write this thing down, like so that I don't forget, which is, again, I would prefer that problem than like hating what I do. I feel very fortunate, but
that's right.
It is difficult to shut your brain off, like, and be healthy and have boundaries. So
dude, totally good. I have a, like when I'm on walks, which I'm doing a lot right now because I've got kids. So like my thing is I'll get, after the work day, especially, like I'll take them for a long stroll and I've got my phone and I've got a notebook, walking notebook, so like anything that's coming in my head, I'm just plugging in there to return to later, it's like, cause like you said, the best ideas come when you're not in front of the screen.
Yeah.
You're doing something else, right? You're in the shower and laying out in bed, you're walking, you're doing something where your actual mind is wandering. So I get it. And I think we're both lucky that we're doing something that we enjoy.
Yeah, I agree. We'll finish with a couple fun questions here. I ask everybody, what was your very, very, very first job?
Very first job was pushing carts at Kmart. But it wasn't just limited to pushing carts. We were also the people that would like take things out of the back, like had the heaviest things that's sitting on this shelf, 20 feet up, that we got to get on a ladder and throw it down and then put it on a pallet and push it out to somebody's car, load it up. And it was eating dirt. Like, it was rough.
Do you think anything that was taken from that or that you learned from that has made you better at what you do today, or made you know what you don't want to do today? Makes you, I presume, feel fortunate. I do, like, when I see stuff like that, like manual labor, I'm like, I get to sit at a computer. Like,
that's right. I think it's just like looking back and you're just like, damn, that's where I started, right? Like, and at that time, it's just, you need a job.
Yeah.
It was minimum wage. And it was cool though, because I think, early in your career, you have to you don't want to be in a situation right away where everything's all grand. Like, I think it's good for your health to experience both sides of that and actually have to do some of the stuff that you don't want to do, like we were talking about,
I agree.
to push yourself further.
No, I agree. What would be your final meal?
Are you familiar with like St. Louis style pizza at all?
Like Emo's? Is that thin crust?
Emo's is my death row meal.
Is that thin crust?
Yeah, they call it cracker style crust.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, I'm a thin crust pizza enthusiast, so I've never had Emo's. I've heard of it though.
So you would love Emo's, and I will tell you that they do ship online now, frozen pizzas.
They're Gold Belly or whatever.
Gold Belly.
Yeah.
Yep. And I would say they're like 80% of the way there. Like, they're definitely worth buying, but they're not as good as in person.
I will give that a try. And then the final question I have for you: who is somebody who inspires you, either personally, professionally, or both?
I think this is like the time where I've got more people to give than I probably ever have. Like, my wife is definitely somebody who inspires me. She's got we really balance off each other very well. We're different people, but share a lot of same things. And so the way that she would handle something is sort of what I need to hear sometimes in order to progress. And same with her. She needs to hear sort of maybe my perspective every once in a while, maybe.
Sure.
With her. So like, she's a really good balance at the end of the day. I've got a really good friend named Pasha that is also a marketer, which is the guy that I was talking about that has his own agency. He's a little bit older than me, but we've got a lot of similarities in some of the things that we've gone through. And I view him as somebody I can trust as a peer, but also somebody that I can go to for advice and a mentor. And then lastly, like, my boss, like, I know a lot of people don't say that, but I genuinely look forward to our one-on-ones. It's a great time to just talk about the health of the company and dig into the personal things, but also the professional things. And she just, she's a beast. Like, she wasn't a marketer, but she knows marketing extremely well and gives me ideas that I wouldn't have come up with in a million years. And I can learn from her. And so when I work for a company, like, it's very important for me to be working around at least some people that I can like really, really learn from. I think it's extremely valuable.
No, that's awesome. We'll have to get the rest of the crew onto the podcast next time, but
just have a group session.
That's what I'm saying. But no, this was awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. I presume for anybody listening, the best place to find you is LinkedIn, I would imagine. Everybody go give Drew a follow. He posts, I think, every day. Are you an everyday cadence at this point in your life?
I'm following in your footsteps, man.
I don't know that those are the footsteps to follow, but I wish you best of luck with, I enjoy your content and it's good. So I don't know that I'm the baseline for that, but
you can find me in Daniel's comment section.
That's even better. Go follow both of us. But Drew, no, thank you very much. And I will talk to you soon.
Thanks, Daniel. Appreciate the time, man.
Thank you for checking out this episode of You Should Talk To. This show is brought to you by the company with the same name, You Should Talk To, a company that helps marketing leaders find the right agency or freelancer for their situation. If you enjoyed what you learned in this episode, make sure to follow You Should Talk To wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, or visit YouShouldTalkTo.com for more information.